Wait, you had lost it?
Yeah, I found it. Yay.
Your Sani scarf?
It was in my closet somewhere.
Oh, the Force has always been with you?
Yeah.
I have that shirt with me too.
The Force. Yeah. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. That's the best shirt.
I'm wearing my... Well, first of all, welcome back to Red Power Hour. I do this thing where I just start recording when we're like in the middle of a conversation, just because, I don't know, like I listen to a lot of podcasts and people are very like formal podcasts, and I don't know, and they have like production assistants and things like that. And we absolutely do not. It's just us kind of bootlegging it. We're just talking about our shirts.
And we're talking about our shirts.
So if you watch the YouTube video, so we record video in addition to the podcast. I'm going to put my screen down. Elena is wearing a fabulous shirt by the End Warrior Brothers, right?
Yep. It's the Force has always been strong with our
And
people.
since the last time we recorded RPH, I have relocated. So I'm on a little sojourn in this spring between my jobs at UNM and the University of Minnesota in the Pacific Northwest. And I'll actually talk a little bit more about that today. But I'm in Seattle. I relocated to Seattle from Portland about 10 days ago. And I went to go visit so these are the ancestral lands of the Duwamish Nation. Well, the Duwamish, but it was also like a meeting place. The Duwamish, the Snohomish, the Sahomish. Oh my God, I get the mishes, all of the mishes. I get the mishes so confused. I'm so sorry. I'm a terrible relative. Lots of mish. Lots of mish relatives up here. But anyway, like Seattle is on Duwamish land specifically. And so I went to the Duwamish Cultural Center and got this t-shirt I wanted to show folks. So it's like, it's called, sorry, you can't even see it. I don't even know what I'm doing. I stand with Duwamish shirt. And so there's this whole, I actually should try to find the people who did this movement and record an interview with them, because I think it's really cool. They did the settler land tax movement here. I remember this like being on social media, gosh, maybe like a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. But I'm just going to hold up the flyer. Can people see that? And so it's called Real Rent Duwamish. And Real Rent calls on people who live and work in Seattle to make rent payments to the Duwamish tribe. Though the city named for the Duwamish leader, Chief Seattle. Chief Seattle, by the way, I've learned a lot of history. He was just like, I know he's like a prominent figure, but he kind of like he was like a very like welcoming to settlers. And I read this history at the Duwamish Cultural Center. His daughter, oh God, what is her name? She looks like a badass, by the way. All of the photos of her look exactly like the matriarchs from Black Mesa. Like she just like puts up with no shit. And Pike's Place Market, which is like it's like a famous tourist destination in downtown Seattle along the water. She actually lived there. She refused to leave after all of the settlers squatted and stole Duwamish land, ran all the Duwamish people out of that particular location, burned all of their longhouses, and even just like 100 years ago, she was just there in her cabin, right where Pike Place Market is, and she's like, I'm not ever leaving. Like, I'm not moving. And I'm like, this is the difference between like men's leadership and women's leadership. She was like, fuck you, I'm not moving from this land. But anyway, I feel like this is in the spirit of her. Though the city named for the Duwamish leader, Chief Seattle, thrives. Does it, though? The tribe has yet to be justly compensated for their land, resources, and livelihood, and you can do something today to stand in solidarity with First Peoples of this land by paying real rent. And that all funds from Real Rent Duwamish go directly to Duwamish Tribal Services. And so if you go to their website, it's just Real Rent Duwamish, and Duwamish is spelled DUWAMISH.org. So yeah, I just wanted to make a pitch for that. I know it's a few years old. I'm not sure how much money they've raised through it, but I don't know. That's just like like landback is all the craze right now in the movement here in Turtle Island, or at least I guess mostly U.S. side of Turtle Island, like indigenous liberation stuff. And so this is like a real tangible way that you can participate in a type of landback. And like these settler taxes, land taxes, there's one in Albuquerque actually that was organized by some comrades in Surge, Stand Up for Racial Justice, and that money has actually been going to indigenous organizations and indigenous people, including the Red Nation. So I would recommend that you either look into it and organize something like that in your city, for example, or just pay into this if you're listening from Seattle. But I just wanted to make that pitch.
Yeah, and when I think of Chief Seattle, I always think of all of the quotes that settlers wear on their T-shirts that are attributed to Chief Seattle. And one of the things I learned a long time ago is that he didn't say most of them. They were attributed to him, but they were written by white journalists and newspaper people, and then attributed to him. And a lot of those quotes that are attributed to Native leaders, first of all, they didn't learn English like that. That was a very, most of those are very made for headlines, like not the way people talk, and certainly not the way Native people would have spoken. But Chief Seattle has a lot of those quotes attributed to him, so I'm glad to hear that his daughter is a badass.
So her name, she was known as Princess Angeline. I was going to say Princess Anna, but it was probably like by all of the settler, like the founding families of Seattle. But her Duwamish name is Kiki Soblu. Kiki Soblu. But yeah, she's a hardcore lady. You can totally, if you just look her up, like you're just like, whoa. But
so all those Starbucks and Microsoft and Boeing and all of those employees should be able to give a lot of land tax.
Like billions of dollars. Isn't like Amazon valued at like $400 billion or something? I'm just saying.
Yeah. Just 1 billion.
Yeah, Jeff.
Okay. Making a pitch for the Duwamish. 1 billion. 1 billion for each square foot of Pike Street.
That's a big ass place.
Yes, someone should go down there with a sign that says, "We're throwing fish on stolen land." Because that's what everybody goes to Pike Street Market for, is to watch the vendors throw fish. And it always cracks me up to go down there and see how people are so fascinated with, like, throwing fish.
Well, I did watch them throw fish, and I was like, that's cool. But also, like, I was like, I want to eat that fish. Which is like, you're not supposed to do as a Navajo you're not really like traditionally we're not supposed to eat fish, but I eat fish. I'm just gonna put it out there. I'm sorry for bringing shame on my people, but the cooler thing is that if you go down to like the south end on the second floor, or maybe it's the alley of the second floor of Pike Place Market, there's like a little subterranean kind of staircase passage, and it takes you to the native-owned store called 8th Generation. Okay, and so I would say if you're a native person and you're coming to Seattle and you want to go to like native destinations or understand more, definitely go to the Duwamish Cultural Center. It's a bit of a hard trip to get to. I've discovered that driving anywhere in Seattle is very difficult. But it's over in West Seattle, right along the Duwamish River, which is like literally where their villages used to be. Go there, but also go to 8th Generation. They have really like, oh my God, like beautiful earrings, and it's all native made, and it's the employees are all native. It was like really, of course the employees are all Dene, they were all Navajo. And I was like, yes, of course. Which, because we're everywhere.
Because Dene are everywhere. But it's a great alternative to, for those of you who, like I did or had when I was younger, I was gifted a lot of Pendleton blankets. And I have a lot of them. And, I love them, but they are, it's appropriation. And they're not native made, they're not native designed. So 8th Generation has the same type of blanket, but they're all native designs and native artists, and native people benefit from it. So if you like those blankets, go to 8th Generation. They actually have a website. Also, if you're not in Seattle, you
Yeah, and those blankets are beautiful.
That's my sales pitch of the day.
Like even the quality of the blanket, they're very soft. I mean, we're not okay. So we haven't even talked about. We're 10 minutes into this, and the topic of today's episode. It's just me and Elena freestyling. One of my Red Nation comrades. I gave a talk. Some graduate students at Yale invited me to give a talk earlier this week, and I was supposed to read some passages from some things I wrote, and I ended up just talking for like 40 minutes and about like the relationships between like internationalism and indigenous feminism and like my thinking on it. And one of my comrades in the Red Nation called it a Dr. Mel freestyle. And I was just like, this is like the Native woman freestyle. Like, I feel like that's what Red Power Hour is. And Elena and I totally have these vibes together. We just do, I don't know, like Native women freestyle hour. Basically, I appreciate all of you who listen to us week after week doing this, because sometimes it like really hits, you know, like perfectly, and other times it's a little like it meanders. We're meandery today, I would say.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a lot of it is just it's just been a weird week, and I think we talked about it yesterday when we were getting ready. We were talking about what we were going to do on the show, and it's just been a weird week all around. I go back to that line, the first line of the Red Deal. There's something about the weather, and it's been a hell of a week here in New Mexico. We have northern New Mexico, we have 4 fires going right now. One of them just started yesterday afternoon while we were talking, and then there's a huge one in the Mescalero Apache lands down to the south. The winds have been terrible. We're in the 9th year of a mega drought, so we have had no moisture in several months, and with the winds blowing and the fires kicking up, it's been really challenging, and it's brought back a lot of bad memories for me, just with the number of fires that we have endured and how many of them have destroyed native land. And of course, here in New Mexico, it's all native land, but really sacred places and places that I used to go when I was a child. And Capo Wingue lost, that's also Santa Clara Pueblo, lost an entire canyon to the Cerro Grande fire. And it was a place that I used to go when I was a kid with my family, and we would fish and camp, and, you know, as little kids and as older kids, and it literally doesn't exist anymore. Like the fire destroyed all of the forests around the canyon, and it just all slid into itself. And so when I start seeing fires like this, it just makes me wonder what else is going to happen. What are we going to lose now? Yeah, and the winds are also really really horrible for people who have allergies and asthma, both of which I suffer from, and not being able to go outside, not feeling like you can go outside and walk around, you know, and in the trees. And, you know, I always talk to the trees because they're our ancestors, and the drought is stressing them terribly, and we're losing a lot of the trees, and then to have these fires, and then not to feel like you can go outside because the smoke and the particulates in the air from all the burning. It's been a very challenging week, and I know that was a downer, but that's what's going on here in Ogopoge.
Well, yeah, I mean, when Elena and I sat down yesterday to prep and to try to think about like what to record today, and yesterday was Earth Day, right? And I think when we, like a couple of months ago, when we were trying to create our RPH schedule of episodes, we were like, we should release an episode for Earth Day. You know, like whatever Earth Day. Just like, you know, like a Red Nation kind of commentary on the significance of Earth Day. And I don't know, I feel like what you just described, Elena, is probably the best and like the most honest kind of reflection on Earth Day that we could be giving right now, which is just like wind and fire and smoke and mass destruction of like trees, and like, you know, just Mother Earth in general. And I remember when we were talking a couple months ago, I was like, we just need to talk about climate change. And, you know, I'm not in the Southwest right now, but I just remember, I think it was like the summer of 2019 in Albuquerque was like, I didn't remember it always just being so hot all the time. And it was like, there was the year I started back at the University of New Mexico and NAS, and there's this Tewa elder. He's a kind of an elder statesman of Native studies, Greg Cajete, really like a prominent thinker in traditional ecological knowledge and like the popularization of that term, in the kind of understanding Native relationships with the land and the water, and even the concept of relationality. And he gave the invocation, I think at the, what was it, our like beginning of the year potluck in August of that year. And he was praying in Tewa. He's from Santa Clara, Pueblo. And he translated his prayer into English for those of us who don't speak Tewa. And I remember that day and like the previous 2 or 3 weeks had been so hot. It was like soul crushingly hot. And there was just like a different quality to it. It was just like seeped in, and I was really scared. That was the first, what I'm trying to say is that was the first summer in New Mexico where I was really scared. Like my body felt climate change in a way that I had not before. And he addressed it in his prayer, and he was talking about, you know, this is a hard time for the earth. This is a hard time for all of us. We're feeling this very strongly right now. And so, you know, he's just praying for like good things and us coming through. And that was almost 3 years ago. That was 2.5 years ago. And each summer after that, the last 2 summers in Albuquerque had felt very similarly, just like bone crushingly hot. And the wind and like the smoke. I was sick a lot, actually, the last 2.5 years that I lived in Albuquerque because of exactly what you're describing, Elena. And it's just very, I don't know, you know, if we're going to be talking about like Earth Day and climate change, I imagine people in other places are feeling the same kind of like it's in your body. Like when it really gets like hits home in your body, it gets really scary to think about what climate change is actually doing. And our comrades, like I wanted to dedicate this episode to our Red Nation comrades. It's like a late night radio call-in show, but we're going to play a song. We're going to play like some cheesy 80s love song. No. Our Red Nation comrades are actually coming together this weekend. They went up to the mountain to give an offering before dawn this morning in the Four Corners, which is our place of emergence as Diné people. Our sacred mountains, that's the place of Tewa emergence as well, is where they're close to. And they've just been messaging all morning about how much wind there is and like how crazy the weather is right now. And so, you know, they're all going to be out on the land today, doing things and gathering for our semi-annual gathering that the Red Nation has, where we make big decisions for the organization and we lay down prayers and things like that. So I know that they are literally in the thick of what we're describing right now. And I don't know. It's crazy to think that like, I talked about this last summer because I got really sick at a ceremony last summer in July because of the confluence of wind, dust, and smoke from fire. And I got sick for like 10 days afterward. Elena, you've been sick kind of because of the confluence of these 3 things. And I was like, man, all of our ceremonies are outside. Like, if you literally want to be on the land, you know, and practice traditional ecological knowledge, for example, like you have to be outside, and being in those elements for like several days straight, it's like physically really hard on your body. Like a lot of people got sick after that ceremony. And that too just has made me really, I'm scared, but also, you know, just trying to think, just reflecting on like how climate change even impacts just like our ability to just be indigenous, like in a very simple way. And so our Red Nation comrades are out on the land right now. They're in sacred land, you know, trying to plot the next steps for indigenous liberation. And I have a feeling a lot of them are going to get sick.
And it's that all of our ceremonies, as Pueblo, not all, many of our ceremonies as Pueblo people are outside and, in within the village, and that's where our dances take place. Because of COVID, many communities have not had dances in 2 years, over 2 years. They start in the kivas, and those are enclosed, and that's where we gather. So the elders, out of an abundance of caution for the elders, folks haven't been gathering in large groups because they don't want to put our elders at risk. So we have that double whammy that it's been challenging. We haven't been gathering in large groups in enclosed spaces, and then it's scary to be outside. So we're getting hit, in two areas, and there's. I was having a conversation earlier this week with a Diné medicine man who came down from Arizona, and we were talking about how spiritually it's been so challenging for those of us who are used to having ceremony multiple times a year, and not only participating in ceremony, but being there for our relatives and visiting with our family members and having feast. And I need a ceremony to address my lack of ceremony. And I said it in such a way that it was kind of a joke, but it wasn't a joke. It was and he said to me, you're absolutely right. I've done a lot of that. Just laying down prayers for people who are feeling spiritually alone. And it kind of surprised me to hear that. I don't know why, but it's true. And it's just, I think that there's, not one to focus or center trauma in any way, but there's just so many more challenges for Native people who are used to being outside, who are used to gathering, who are used to being with family. And so it's not only just missing our relatives, but it's literally missing that connection that we have to our communities and those communal prayers and the communal songs. And it's just, it feels almost like we may be moving away from the pandemic, but we're moving into, being challenged again and again with climate change. And so it's one damn thing after another. We just can't catch a break. And I know that sounds so selfish, I want a break. I'm done with all this. But literally, we're not able to be healthy, being Indigenous.
No, I mean, God, whoa, what you just said about
I don't know.
How COVID made it impossible to come together inside, in indoor spaces that are really important for ceremonial activities, but now and so it's put us outside, but we also can't be outside because of climate change, and so and COVID, of course, is I think a lot of people have written very smartly and have linked COVID and the emergence, just a pandemic related to climate change, and particularly capitalism and industrial agriculture, industrial food and those types of things that, of course, have really accelerated, that release a lot of fossil fuels, that release a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, that, of course, has really accelerated climate change. And so the pandemic, being a phenomenon of climate change, obviously attacks the body, not just human bodies, but we know that deer can catch COVID. And so here we have the question of just health, just basic health, our ability as everyone, of course, but I'm just going to talk about Indigenous people, our ability and just being well enough to even go to ceremonies, and just being well enough to go out and herd sheep, or just do our daily duties, just being well enough to, do this goddamn podcast. Like Elena was sick yesterday. When we tried to record a month ago, I was very sick actually. And I think that the like just the physical effect on our bodies, the human body has been really difficult for me to navigate over the last few years. And so, being driven outside by COVID, it's also like your body has to face a whole other slew of contaminants and, like you said, particulates and just like elements. And I have now seen several ceremonies over the last few years where like I have seen people really suffer. I mean, there's a whole thing about suffering, like suffering for the people that is kind of built into prayer in a way. But this suffering is like, it's just suffering. And it doesn't even feel like spiritually productive is kind of what I'm saying. We're just suffering and we just keep suffering. And it's like, well, we can't stop doing these things because this is who we are. And we know that, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later as we're riffing on something else, but the thing that is going to get us through to the next world, like we're authoring a new society right now, essentially, and we're like in the thick of the shit, I think, in this massive transition. But like indigenous people being indigenous and like sticking to these prayers and like following the guidance of women specifically, like the prayer of the Red Nation is an indigenous women's prayer. I'm just going to put that out there. And like, that's what guides us as an organization. And that's what our comrades are like coming together this weekend to like feed that prayer. And so the extent to which we are able to do that and we follow the guidance of indigenous women and we hold that prayer through ceremony and also through action front and center is the extent to which we're going to survive and be able to make it to the next phase of our existence, and life on this planet. And yet our ability to be able to do that, oh my God, our capacity is so diminished. And there's just a lot of suffering. There's a lot of suffering that's involved in even just being able to do those basic things. And just listening to our medicine people talk, like you said, Elena, about how, they work so hard. They don't sleep because of how much suffering there has been, especially because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And then they worry so much about drought. They worry so much that we're not caretaking the land, and laying down the kinds of prayers and offerings that we're supposed to in this time. And they're under such remarkable stress. And I would say medicine people right now are like the most overworked people. Medicine people and like nurses, honestly, are probably the most, people who look after our like total well-being are the people who are just so chronically overworked. And some of these medicine people are like 80 years old, and it's like, we can't depend on the caretakers always. Like we have to be able to take up this work ourselves, even though we're like physically compromised all the time. And I think it's important. I mean, this is a bit depressing, but it's just the truth. I have a lot of health problems. Like I don't talk about this much in public, but like I have to constantly like be at the mercy of my body in order to like produce things, to do this podcast, to write the book that I'm writing, to teach, to be on a front line fighting fascists and those types of things. And so I've lived this way for most of my adult life. And many people in my family have, but I think people need to be really honest and serious about how do we get this done and like do the work and continue to advance the struggle for Indigenous liberation when like physically we are at a diminished capacity, and like that is not going to change. If anything, it's going to get worse, or we're just going to have to like accept this reality that the suffering, like the actual physical suffering that comes with things like COVID and fires and climate change, it's like it's manifesting in like our physical health. And I think about it all the time, but it's just the reality, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely think it is. And I have real hope that Okewinge will dance the first time in a couple of years in public in June, because we have two feast days in June, and they're really super important to me, because the first one on the 13th is to farmers, is laying down it's a green corn dance, and it's laying down prayers for farming and for water and for all of the things that we need. And in our ceremonies, the women are always dressed in 3 or 4 layers, and it's the hottest part of the year. Typically, we're talking 102, 105 degrees. And I have done that many, many times in my life. And, you transcend it, because you are no longer a human being. You are that prayer. You become that prayer. And so transcending the heat is kind of just what you do. But when I think about it now, having gotten so sick after being outside one day in this smoke and wind, and I wonder, like, if I can. I don't think I can do it. I don't honestly think I can dance for an entire day in this smoke, because I think it would kill me. It would really do a lot of harm to my health. And so I, as I get older, there is no shame or anything in passing down the responsibility to the younger people. And we have so many great younger people. And as you achieve this certain age and you become an elder, you can support in other ways. And so I'm going to have to start learning to accept that, because I don't think it's going to change. I mean, I could say that maybe this year on the 13th, it's really bad because we have a lot of fires and there's a lot of wind, but I don't believe that it's going to resolve by next year. I think it's going to get worse. This is not just about these particular fires on this particular year. This is about extended effects of climate change. And unless we do something to mitigate it, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And it's going to continue to affect our health and our ability to participate in ceremonies and our ability to maintain this level of struggle that we have to.
Right? Like we say in the Red Deal, it's decolonization or extinction. Like, we literally have no choice. And so suffering, that's just what's on the table. And this is clarifying something for me, but this is happening in live time as we're recording this podcast. You know what you said, Elena, about like transcending the heat during the green corn dance. Like transcending heat is like something that is really it's like a staple of Indigenous ceremonies, I would say. Like, actually, now that you said that, transcending
it really
heat.
Is.
And
yes, it is.
I've been thinking, I have recognized like my Indigenous women spidey senses. I'd say this started happening at the end of 2020, in the fall of 2020. We were 6 months into the pandemic or whatever. And I realized that I'm not entirely sure, that the left, for example, like we talk a lot about the left and the movement, the quote unquote the left in a place like the United States, or like radical politics. And I'm not entirely sure that my conception of like the movement, or like our capacity to build something called a movement for like revolutionary struggle, my thinking on that has changed actually dramatically, largely because of what we're talking about. I think it's not so much my experience in movement spaces, it's actually my experience in like Indigenous spaces and like ceremonial spaces over the last 2 years, a year and a half, I would say. And I think, this concept of transcending heat, because the world is literally heating up, and like heat is like a thing now that causes great suffering. I mean, it has for me over the past 3 years. Like I was describing the summers in Albuquerque, I think that Indigenous people and those of us who are doing this work, especially people who are Indigenous doing this work, I would just recommend that you continue to go into spaces where you have to transcend heat. I think that particular act not only physically will help us, endure and make it through this difficult transition that's happening on a planetary level, but being connected to that, and not just physically doing it, but being connected to like what that means in terms of like the spiritual aspect is really going to be essential as we move forward and do this work. And the Red Nation, I think it's okay for us, obviously not going to give details or anything like that, but our response to the pandemic was to actually become more focused on like the spiritual and the ceremonial aspect of what we're doing as an organization. And over the last 2 years, that has deepened dramatically in the organization. And I'm not going to divulge anything because it's really not anyone's business, but ours. But our response to the pandemic and our response to climate change has been to like increase the opportunity for us to come together to transcend heat, I guess, for lack of a better word, together. And that's literally what our comrades are doing this weekend, actually, out on the land. And so it's like a practice that I think more of our people, if they're not already doing it, and especially those of us who are doing like actual organizing and frontline work, I think it's actually really important. There's something about it that we need to be able to be really solid in that if we're going to make it through, or if we're going to provide any type of leadership. If we want our people to listen to us, man, we got to be able to do that. Don't you think?
Yeah. Absolutely. And just, for Native people, just reach out to your medicine people, reach out to your elders, ask them what they're doing, ask them what you can do. I mean, we have been really fortunate in the Red Nation because we have a number of different communities represented, and communities that are willing to share their practices, and it's helped us all as an organization and as relatives.
Yeah. Last year was hell on earth for the Red Nation.
Challenging times, and yep. And you get into these like just places where it's so dark. You just feel like the future looks dark, and then it looks like it's on fire. And what do you do? And we know that we have a joke. I don't know if other communities have it, but at Okewenge we always laugh because the women are always wearing too many clothes during the hottest dances, and the men are always wearing too few clothes in the coldest months. Is they get to they get to dance in February with no clothes on, and we get to dance in June with too many clothes on.
Man, those Indians sure like to suffer.
But it's all about. It is. My great grandmother, my Sat Ya, used to say when she was putting us all together for dances, she would say, "Yeah, being an Indian is hard." But it's true. It's about transcendence.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It's about knowing that you become the prayers and you become the drum beats, and that what you're feeling physically, what your body is feeling, is no longer important because you're in the prayer, and it's the only place to be. I think right now.
Mic drop. That was what I was trying to say, and you said it in far fewer words. But